Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Ecclesiastes Class. Those of you joining us at home, welcome. We are so happy to have you with us this morning, and we pray the Lord is just blessing you and your lives and your families. This morning we are on class number 8, and we're going to be doing the 6th chapter of Ecclesiastes, and we're going to go several verses into the 7th chapter as well. The 6th chapter is a pretty short chapter. For those of you that are here in class, you have notes over here. If you're at home and you're following, just click on the link for the notes and you can download the notes, and you'll have all the same notes people have here. And also you will need a copy of your Bible. And please open it to Ecclesiastes chapter 6. So what we've seen over the last few weeks is Solomon has been sharing some wisdom with us that's been a little bit better than what he had been previously. Solomon previously was just sharing what we call under the sun wisdom, stuff that's earthly wisdom, things that everybody here on earth thinks of as wisdom, but that really isn't God's wisdom. God's wisdom is above the sun wisdom. But we see that that Solomon also had some above the sun wisdom, because we see him starting to show that to us. And over the last few weeks, we've seen him show us a few things. One is that God, for his purposes, allows wicked men to oppress others. And that answers a question many of us have. Why is there evil in the world, right? Well, God, for his purposes, allows that. We saw that, and Solomon made that point with us last week. We saw also that we should approach God in reverence. We don't approach God saying, I want, gimme, gimme, gimme. That is not the way that we should be approaching God. We should be approaching God reverently in prayer and listening to him. That's the most important thing, is listening to what he wants from us. Third is we need to keep our word. If we give our word to God, we need to keep that word. If we give our word to other human beings, we need to keep that word. Our word is important. It's a major piece of our character. And God expects us to have that kind of character if we're going to be his. Another piece of what Solomon shared with us last week is that what we accumulate in life and what we achieve in life is not what counts in the end. What counts in the end is what we get spiritually out of this life. The connection that we have with God that comes out of this life is what counts in the end. All that other stuff is fleeting. It passes by. I was telling you stories when I was visiting some of the tombs in Egypt, just all the myriad paintings and etchings and the sheer amount of gold and riches and all that stuff that the people thought they could take with them. They couldn't. They didn't take any of that with them. The only thing we take with us out of this life is what we build spiritually in our soul. That's what we take with us out of this life. Another point that Solomon was on last week is what you accumulate or achieve, is that true commitment comes from being satisfied with what God provides you. So many folks in this world want more, and they're just never satisfied. And Solomon began to talk to us about that last week. He's going to talk to us again about that in this morning's lesson, that we need to be satisfied with what we have. If we're satisfied with what we have, then we don't want for anything. So let me start by reading to you the first 2 verses of chapter 6. This is Solomon speaking. I have seen another evil under the sun. Under the sun, by the way, is on earth. He's talking about things that he sees on earth. That's as distinct from God's wisdom. So I have seen another evil under the sun, and it weighs heavily on mankind. God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor, so they lack nothing their hearts desire. But God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them, and strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaningless, a grievous evil. So what he is saying is that, and this weighs heavily on his mind. We've talked about this a number of times over recent weeks, but it's so important to Solomon that he brings it back in another format here today. He says that God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor. So some of us get wealth, possessions, and honor, some of us don't. Isn't that interesting? God blesses some of us with wealth, possessions, and honor, and some of us he doesn't. Doesn't quite seem fair, right? But what God goes on to, or what Solomon goes on to tell us, is that those who get blessed with wealth, possessions, and honor frequently are lacking something very critical, and that is the interior ability within their hearts, within their souls, to be able to enjoy that, the ability to enjoy what God has given them. That frequently God gives people who get a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of wealth, a lot of accolades, a lot of honor. People who get that stuff frequently need more. What they want is more, 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 more. They can't enjoy what God has given them. Solomon has this problem himself. One of the things I want to point out to you is those three words: wealth, possessions, and honor. Let's go back and let's look at something that we saw back in 1 Chronicles 1, 9 through 13. This was the period, this was the time when God gave Solomon wisdom. Solomon asked for wisdom. God was surprised. He didn't expect Solomon to ask to do that. But Solomon asked for wisdom, and God gave it to him. And then he said, because you asked for wisdom, and you asked more than just wisdom, you asked for the wisdom to rule your people well, in a godly manner. So because you asked for that, I'm going to give you the stuff you didn't ask for. And the stuff you didn't ask for is those three words. So let's go back and read this. This is 1 Chronicles 1. Oops, 1 Chronicles, I'm in the wrong place here.
Second Chronicles.
Second Chronicles.
Oh. Isn't that first? Second.
No, it's second. It is second, yeah. I'm sorry, I wrote the wrong wrong thing down for you in your notes.
No, 11.
Right, 2 Chronicles 1, 9 through 13. I'm sorry, I wrote 1 Chronicles in your notes. 2 Chronicles 1, 9 through 13. Now, Lord God, let your promise to my father David be confirmed, for you have made me king over a people who are as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me wisdom and knowledge that I may lead this people. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? So Solomon asks the Lord, the Lord says, I'll give you anything you want. What do you want? And Solomon says, I want wisdom and knowledge to lead my people in a godly way. God says, wow, that is great, right? That is wonderful. Thank you for asking for that. What a great idea. God said to Solomon, since this is your heart's desire, and you have not asked for wealth, riches, and honor. Does that sound familiar? Wealth, riches, and honor. Since you have not asked for wealth, riches, and honor, nor for the death of your enemies, and since you have not asked for a long life, but for wisdom and knowledge to govern my people, over whom I have made you king, therefore wisdom and knowledge will be given to you. So God gives him that wisdom and knowledge, right? The thing that he asked for. Because he didn't ask for the death of his opponents. He didn't ask for money, power, honor, all that stuff. He didn't ask for those three things that we just talked about. Because of that, God is going to give him that wisdom. And I will also give you wealth, riches, and honor, such as no king who was before you ever had, and none after you will have. So God says, because you didn't ask for this other stuff, I'm going to give it to you anyway. Because you asked for the right thing, I'm going to give you the other stuff you didn't ask for. Sounds great, right? All of a sudden, Solomon's going to become the richest man in the world. He can have all the wives he wants. He can have all the honor, all the power. He will have this great kingdom. Sounds great, right? Problem is, that's a two-edged sword. Riches, honor, and power are a true two-edged sword. When you have those, you have a tendency to misuse them, and you have a tendency to want more. And that's exactly the trap that Solomon fell into. So God, right in this passage we just read, God gave him these extra three things that he didn't ask for. The question is, will he use them correctly? And the answer is no, he didn't use them correctly. And that's what leads to all of these problems that Solomon had later in his life. Led ultimately to his kingdom being split when he died, into a northern and a southern kingdom. Questions on that? So it's interesting that those are the exact three words that we see here in this passage that we saw back in 2 Chronicles 1. Wealth, possessions, and honor, right? Those are the three things that God has given him, and he now realizes that that's a double-edged sword. It's kind of a curse in a way. God has given him wealth, possessions, and honor. He lacks nothing his heart desires, right? If my heart wants it, if I want it, I can have it. I have the money, I have the power, I have everything to get whatever I want. But God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them. So there's the downside, right? God did not give Solomon the ability to enjoy that stuff. And Solomon suffered from that now, and he realizes that. And he's realizing that all he wants is more. He wants more wives, more money, more power, more for his kingdom. And instead of just being satisfied with what God has given him. There's a lesson there. Let's be satisfied with what God gives us in life. To want more and more and more and more never leads us to a good place. And it goes on to say, and strangers enjoy them instead. Okay? So what's going to happen here with all of this wealth, power, and money that he's got? Ultimately, strangers are going to enjoy that. Ultimately, his son is going to get that when he dies. His son is going to completely squander it. His son immediately goes out and hires a huge army because he wants to conquer the northern kingdom, which is now splitting away because his son is such a bad ruler. So he goes out and spends all of Solomon's money hiring a big army. And the army says, we're not going to go fight and kill Jews. We're not going to do that. So they take the money and run, right? So all of a sudden, Solomon's wealth all is gone almost immediately after he dies. Interesting, huh? So the ability to enjoy all of that wealth, power, and influence all goes to strangers. It's meaningless. It's a grievous evil. And Solomon, by this point in life, when he's writing this, realized that this was probably going to happen, that his son was not going to use this wisely, and it was probably all going to just fall apart. Questions on that? Well, let's move on now to verses 3 through 6. I'm going to read that to you first. A man may have 100 children and live many years, yet no matter how long he lives, if he cannot enjoy his prosperity and does not receive proper burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. It comes without meaning, it departs in darkness, and in darkness its name is shrouded. Though it never saw the sun or knew anything, it has more rest than does that man. Even if he lives 1,000 years twice over, but fails to enjoy his prosperity, do not all go to the same place. So this is kind of on a very similar message to what we just talked about, right? Which it's very similar to what we just talked about. So God may bless a man with 100 children. Now we know Solomon had hundreds of wives. We don't know exactly how many children he had, but presumably it was a lot. So a man may have 100 children and live many years. Solomon did live a good full life. He was on the throne for 40 years. He lived a full life. Yet no matter how long he lives, he will not enjoy his prosperity and doesn't receive proper burial. So Solomon is not enjoying his prosperity because of how he lived his life, because of the decisions he made of what to do with those three things, with that wealth, possessions, and honor. Those are the three things we saw. God gave those to him as a gift. He didn't use them correctly. Because he didn't use them correctly, he ended up in a situation where he couldn't enjoy them. He ended up in a situation in life where he just wanted more. That's all he wanted. And we know so many rich people today that are in this situation. So many people who have so much money and can buy anything they want in the world, but don't have the calmness in their heart that a connection with God would give them. It says he doesn't receive a proper burial. That was probably a lot more important in those days than it is in ours. He goes on to say, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. So he's back to this idea, maybe you were better off never born, right? Maybe rather than having all this money, wealth, and power, maybe you're better off to have never been born in the first place. What's more, maybe you're better off to have been stillborn. In other words, conceived as a child, but stillborn. Well, now there's two different ways we can look at that. We can look at that with above the sun logic, or we can look at it with under the sun logic, or above the sun wisdom, or under the sun wisdom. Let's kind of do both as we think about that idea. The idea of a stillborn child, or a child who's miscarried. The scriptures make it clear that God breathes a soul into that child very early on, probably at conception, that God has breathed a soul, a human soul, into that. So that is now a child of God from a very, very early moment in that pregnancy. God has done that. And yet, the baby doesn't get born. It does not actually get born into this world. It's either stillborn or it is miscarried. Is that a tragedy? What happens? If that baby has a human soul in it, the scriptures make it pretty clear that that baby is going to go and be in heaven, is going to be with God, is going to be with Jesus. So is that baby really in a worse place? Eternally speaking, above the sun, wisdom. Is that baby really in a worse place for that? In one respect, you could look at it and say, well, that baby has gotten to a place that the rest of us have to spend 80 years here on earth getting to, and have to do all the right stuff, and that baby gets there immediately. So maybe that baby is blessed in one respect, in the respect of being able to be with God immediately, right away. Now, there's another side to that. The other side to that is that baby never gets a chance to enjoy life on this earth. And that's a major thing. That's a thing that all of us are in the process of doing. Hopefully, if we have Christ in our heart, we're really enjoying our lives here on earth. So he's saying that that baby is better off. Well, from a above the sun wisdom point of view, that's absolutely true. And it's especially absolutely true if some of the people down here on earth are, have unconfessed sins when they die. If that's the case, then they're not going to be in a good place afterwards. They're going to be without God for eternity if they do that. So we see a difference here, that people down here who spend their lives on money and power and honor and don't have God in their hearts are heading for a place that is much less privileged than people who were never actually born, who were conceived but never actually born. It's a very profound concept that he's talking about here. Questions on that? It's a little deep.
Do you think Solomon understood that?
Probably not. The Jewish people have a different view of eternity and the soul than we have. Our view is informed by the New Testament. The Old Testament doesn't give the same level of insight into that. I find the Jewish people that I know today do not have that same view of eternity that we as Christians have. The idea that if we accept Christ, if we accept God into our lives, we can be with him forever. That our soul will just live on and be with him forever. So I find that lacking in the Jewish people that I know of who are deeply into their faith. I find that somewhat lacking today. So my guess is maybe not. Can't tell you for sure about Solomon, but probably not. I mean, God did give him a lot of wisdom, but it's pretty clear that the wisdom he got was the under the sun variety. He's really struggling with the above the sun kind of variety of wisdom, the stuff, the godly wisdom, the wisdom of what's really important about our lives. I'm not answering your question, but I'm giving my best shot at it. Other questions we might have? Okay. It says, it comes without meaning, it departs in darkness. So his view is, this child is never born. This child never gets out of the womb. It's in the womb in darkness, and it never sees the sun. Right? In darkness its name is shrouded. Though it never saw the sun or knew anything, it has more rest than does that man. So this child will have more rest than that man who has all these wealth, honor, and power does. Interesting. Interesting that Solomon understood that enough to say it that way. Even if he lives 1,000 years twice over, but fails to enjoy his prosperity. So even if a man lives a huge amount of time, 2,000 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and doesn't enjoy his prosperity, he's not as blessed as a baby who got to be with God immediately. Do not all go to the same place. No, they don't. Under the sun, they do, yes. Under the sun, we all go to the same place. We all go to a place in the ground when we're dead. But above the sun, no, we don't all go to the same place. Above the sun, what he says is not correct here. Above the sun, that's our spirit, that's our soul that's inside of us. Our soul goes someplace else. Our soul goes either to be with God or to be apart from God in the end. I know I'm saying all this and you all know that, but questions before we move on? Okay, verse 7. Everyone's toil is for their mouth, yet their appetite is never satisfied. What advantage have the wise over fools? What do the poor gain by knowing how to conduct themselves before others? Better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Whatever exists has already been named, and what humanity is has been known. No one can contend with someone who is stronger. The more the words, the less the meaning. And how does that profit anyone? So, first of all, Solomon starts by saying everyone's toil is for their mouth. So Solomon is saying the reason we work is for the basic needs of life. We need to have food, we need to have clothing, shelter, all of that. That's ultimately the reason that we work. Hopefully we get more than that out of our work. Hopefully our work brings us some satisfaction that goes beyond just putting food in our mouth and having a roof over our heads and some clothes on our body. Hopefully our work does that. Not everybody's does, but hopefully we do. Yet their appetite is never satisfied. So he's talking again about this rich person, the person who has all this money, power, and honor. So their appetite is never satisfied. So here, most people just work so that they can have the essentials of life, and then maybe a little bit above that. But these folks who have money, power, and honor that we talked about earlier work to get more. And they always want more. Their appetite is never satisfied. So it's just, he's comparing the word appetite to the concept of toil for their mouth. The idea that most people work to put stuff in their mouth, food. These people work to have an appetite for more. What advantage have the wise over fools? So, are these people really wise, first of all? People who accumulate all this wealth, power, and honor, are they really wise? Are they really? Not really, right? They're not really wise. So, what advantage have the wise over fools? None. If anything, they might be more foolish than the poor, than the people who don't have the money, wealth, and honor, but who do have a connection with God. What do the poor gain by knowing how to conduct themselves before others? So he's saying, so what about the poor? Okay, yeah, the poor have to struggle every day to go out and get food for the table and have shelter over their heads and all that stuff. So what about the poor? They know how to conduct themselves before others. They don't have that arrogant, this is mine and I should rule over you kind of attitude that we see from a lot of rich people. The poor know how to conduct themselves against others, or before others. Is that a blessing? Yeah, it is, right? The poor have a blessing that frequently the rich don't have. A lot of people don't look at it that way, but they do. They have a blessing of being able to conduct themselves with other people in a way that is more appropriate than the rich people do very often. Better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. So it's better that we should have the things that are in front of us, the things that we know we have, than to just be out there saying, I want more, more, more. Solomon really hits this concept again and again and again through here, right? The idea that people who have too much just want more and don't enjoy what they have. And that's a gift that God has taken away from them because he gave them all these riches. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So he's continues to hit this idea that to have all this stuff is meaningless. You're just chasing after the wind. Again, you can't take it with you. Verse 10, whatever exists has already been named, and what humanity is has been known. So things that are in the world today have already been named. Who names them? To some extent, Adam and Eve got a chance to name them. As human beings, we get the ability to name the animals, right? Because Adam and Eve got the ability to name the animals. But the real naming of things comes from the person who creates them. For example, if we create a child, we get to name that child. God creates us, he gets to name us. The name that he gave us back in chapter 1 of Genesis is Adam, A-D-A-M. We call it Adam in our pronunciation, but Adam. And Adam in Hebrew means red clay. Interesting. So Adam was named after red clay. Adam was named after literally the dust of the ground, right? So God named Adam red clay and named us as descendants of Adam red clay, so that we're always mindful of the fact that we ain't much, right? We are created by God out of the dust of the ground. We would be nothing if it weren't for him. We wouldn't be here at all if it weren't for him. We are nothing. We were created out of the dust of the ground, just as Adam was. So when it says whatever exists has already been named, God named us, and he named us Adam. He named us man. What humanity is has been known. No one can contend with someone who is stronger. So we know what humanity is. And someone stronger would be God. Who can contend with God? We are nothing but red clay. We are nothing but the dust of the ground. How do we contend with God? We don't, right? God is going to direct our lives. He is going to direct everything about our lives. We just need to get in sync with him so that our lives are going where he wants them to go. The more the words, the less the meaning. Excuse me. The more the words, the less the meaning. And how does that profit anyone? So we as human beings can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. We can say things until we're blue in the face. But I think we all know that the more we listen to people just babble on, the less meaning we're getting out of what they're saying, right? The more words we put out there, the less those words mean. Smaller amount of words can sometimes mean a lot more. So the more the words, the less the meaning. Mankind can frequently use lots and lots and lots of words for things, but they don't necessarily mean a whole lot in God's plan. And how does that profit anyone? If we're out there just putting a whole lot of words out there in the world, then it may not be really profiting us. It may not be profiting anyone. For who knows what is good for a person in life during the few and meaningless days they pass through like a shadow? And who can tell them what will happen under the sun when they are gone? So who knows what is good for a person in life during the few and meaningless days they pass through like a shadow? A couple of pieces in there. First of all, do we know what's best for us in life? Not really. God knows what's best for us in life. That's a key lesson here. We don't know what's best for us in life. He does. We need to seek his guidance about what's best for us in life. So who knows what's good for a person in life? God does. During those few and meaningless days, they pass through life like a shadow. Isn't that an interesting phrase, right? Our days here on earth, whether it be 1 day or 80 years, our days here on earth are few and meaningless. There's a very specific number of days that we are here on earth. God knows those days. We don't, but God knows those days. And we're going to pass through those days almost like a shadow that's kind of there but kind of not there, right? So we pass through life almost like a shadow. Life, God is here permanently. He's here through all of our lives, through all the lives of everyone. But we just kind of come in like a shadow and then go out. And we are in life and out of life. Who can tell them what will happen under the sun after they are gone? So even here on earth, after we're gone, we know what's going to happen up here above the sun after we're gone. We're either going to be with Jesus or we're not. That's easy. And we're going to be there forever or we're not. But under the sun, things are going to be different, and we don't know what's going to happen. Everything could completely change. Who knows what might happen tomorrow in the world? If we're gone, we're not going to know, so why worry about it, right? Well, we need to worry about it for our children, but not for ourselves. So, who can tell them what will happen under the sun after they're gone? So under the sun, here on earth, things are going to change, but we don't know what those will be. So why are we building up all this wealth and money and power and honor here on earth? It's all perishable. It's all going to disappear with us when we go. Questions on that before we move on to chapter 7? Let me get new notes out here. So in chapter 7, Solomon's going to give us some advice on our lives. He's getting a little stronger here as we go through it. As we'll see, he still is not on target yet by any means, but he's getting a little closer to figuring this out. So let me read you verse 1. A good name is better. A good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of death better than the day of birth. So what's perfume do, right? It covers up the natural odor of the body. That's what perfume does. So people put perfume on to be more attractive, to not reflect the fact that they're sweating or whatever it is that's going on with them. So they smell better when they have fine perfume. Does that really get to their character, though? Does a person who wears good perfume have better character than one who doesn't? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Might be, but probably not. So a good name, a good character is an important thing here on earth. That's part of Solomon's wisdom for us. Keep your character clean, right? Keep your good name out there. Be a person who is of integrity, of honor. That's the kind of person we need to be in this world. A good name is better than fine perfume. If we have that good name, if people know that we are a person of character, then we don't need to put the perfume on. We just don't need to do that. They know who we really are. They know who we really are underneath. He says, the day of death is better than the day of life. Isn't that an interesting one? As Christians, we know that, right? Again, if you look at it from above the sun wisdom, we know that on the day of our death, if we are with Christ, it's going to be the greatest day of our life. It will be the day when we will finally meet Jesus, and we will be there, and he will welcome us into his arms for eternity. So above the sun wisdom, as Christians, we know that that's true. It's interesting that he knows that here too. For a guy who's having all these issues, he knows that here too. He knows that the day of death is better than the day of life. But is he thinking of that with above the sun wisdom, or is he thinking of it with under the sun wisdom? I would submit to you that I think he's thinking of it with under the sun wisdom. With under the sun wisdom, on the day of his death, he no longer has to deal with all the complexities of life. He no longer has to deal with the fact that he wants more and more and more. He no longer has to deal with the fact that he's just not really happy anymore. So I think Solomon's probably looking at that with under the sun wisdom, with wisdom that says, on the day of my death, I'll finally be rid of all this earthly stuff that's been bugging me for all these years. I think that's what he's saying here. Verse 2, it is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, for death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. That's another piece of what leads me to what I just said in verse 1, that I think he's talking about under the sun stuff here, stuff on earth. Let me go through that again. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. Well, we've all been, or most of us have been in funeral situations in a house of mourning, where people are getting together and supporting each other, mourning the passing of a person that they love, and trying to help the people, the survivors, to survive that and to get through that. So it's better for us to be doing that in our lives than to be going to a feast, than just gorging ourselves with food. I was at a Thanksgiving dinner yesterday for my family pieces down in Kentucky, and we ate a lot of food. We did a whole lot of feasting. I don't know that I got a whole lot out of that other than here. But you know, a day of feasting is not something that has a real significant effect on us. We eat some food, we feel good for a while, and we spend some time with families and whatnot, but then we're done with that and we move on to something else. A day of mourning builds more character than a day of feasting. A day of feasting isn't really building our character. A day of mourning really is. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. So, under the sun, down here, under the sun, we're all going to die, right? Unless Jesus comes back and raptures us, and I hope he does. But unless Jesus comes back and raptures us, we're all going to die. And someday when we die, that's our destiny. And that doesn't matter if we're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if you're the poorest person in the world or if you are the richest person in the world. You're going to face the same fate eventually. The living should take this to heart. People who are alive today should realize that we're all going to die. And there's not a whole lot of difference in that from one person to another. I know you all know that, but he's making it clear here. And he goes on to say, frustration is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart. So laughter is great. We all enjoy laughing. Nothing we enjoy more than laughing. But frustration might be better for our character because it teaches us perseverance. It teaches us, when we get frustrated by something, it teaches us to stick to it, to figure it out, to work it out, to get through it. Those are character-building traits. So frustration can build our character. It's better for us than laughter. Just laughing at a joke that some comedian says, great. I just, over dinner yesterday, my granddaughters were doing knock-knock jokes and why did the chicken cross the road jokes. They were great, a lot of fun, laughter, but, you know, I can't even remember one of them right now, why the chicken crossed the road.
Get to the other side.
It was pretty silly. Well, it depends. If you say to get to the other side, then they come up with a different answer. That's the 5-year-old logic or the 6-year-old logic. My 2 granddaughters are 5 and 6. So, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure. So, and mourning here is mourning. So, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning. So, wise people understand that they grow more by mourning over people than they do by laughing or pleasure, by just going out and doing stuff. I mean, riding a roller coaster is a lot of fun, but you don't grow as much from riding a roller coaster as you do from being in a mourning situation where you're comforting family members who have lost someone. You grow a lot more in that situation than you do riding a roller coaster and getting a quick, cheap thrill out of something in life. And you may not all like roller coasters, I do, but whatever your particular thrill is, driving your car at 100 miles an hour, whatever your thrill is, it doesn't do as much for your character as mourning does, as being able to get together with people and mourn the passing of a person.
You understand the reality of the life.
Yes.
Of
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Those of us that have a few years on us have done this a few times, and we know that that life is perishable. I've buried a lot of very close people in recent years, and most of us that are of older generation have. It is better to heed the rebuke of a wise person than to listen to the song of fools. Now there's a good one. Jesus talks about this too, that, you know, you should, if somebody who's wise and from the church comes to you and rebuke you, then you should be listening to that. Matthew 18:15, right? If somebody in God's family is doing something wrong, we need to go to them and lovingly explain to them that they're doing something wrong. That is in essence a rebuke. So we need to hear the rebuke of a wise person. We need to hear people say, hey, you're not doing this right. You're messing up here. You need to change what you're doing. That is so growing for us to be able to do that, to hear the rebuke of a wise person. The alternative is to hear fools telling us, hey, you're doing great, everything's great, you know, you're just the greatest guy in the world, wow, it's wonderful. We learn a lot more by listening to people who are wise, rebuking us over what we are doing. Like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is meaningless. In these days, they had cooking fires. They cooked with wood. And the way to cook with wood is to have wood under the fire, to have a fire that's made out of wood. If you have a fire that's made out of wood, it burns relatively consistently, and that means you have a consistent amount of heat coming out, and you can cook over it. So you can do a good cooking over a fire that's made out of wood. If you throw in thorns, which is just, dried out thorns, if you throw those into the fire, they're gonna crackle and pop and have a little bit of sparks coming out and flames coming out very quickly, but it's gonna be gone in a matter of a minute or so, and then your heat doesn't really do you any good for cooking. It might warm your pot up a degree or two, but it's not really going to cook the meal that's in it. So thorns are not good for cooking. Last weekend I had to burn a whole lot of trash, or a whole lot of, not trash, a whole lot of brush around my farm, around my house. And it doesn't produce the same kind of fire that you get if you're creating a fire out of wood, because a fire out of wood is consistent, the heat is consistent. A fire out of brush was up and down, up and down, up and down. You throw more brush on, whoosh, and then it burns down, and you throw more brush on, whoosh, and then it comes down, and so on. It's a feast and famine kind of thing on the fire. It's not a good fire for cooking over. You can't cook over that kind of fire. So we're going to stop there for this week. We're actually done a little bit early. And next week we're going to get into deeper into chapter 7. We're going to finish chapter 7. Any questions on today's lesson? Well, for those of you at home, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And for those of you here in class,